Happy Mother's Day. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, and it was an amazing week, a dramatic rescue in Cleveland of 3 women who had been missing for a decade. A jury convicts Jodi Arias of first-degree murder, and nobody can explain why the media thinks that's such a ginormous story. Legislators deal a sharp setback to plans to build a streetcar in downtown Milwaukee and approve changes to residency rules, including a 15-mile limit for first responders. A plan to whack the salaries of the Milwaukee County Board gets closer to passage. The state gets good budget news. Revenues are up by $500 million, and the politicians are already talking about how to spend it. A consultant report says the Brown Deer police did nothing wrong in the way they handled incidents involving gunman Radcliffe Houghton and his wife in the months and years before the Azana Salon shootings. Can you say whitewash? And Waukesha mental health officials said they did nothing wrong when they ignored repeated pleas from the parents of a man who is now accused of murdering 3 people in Lafayette County. But we start with this. Vindication for Senator Ron Johnson. You might remember this exchange.
Again, we were misled that there were supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Now, Johns was widely criticized on the left and in the media for that exchange, but this week, dramatic testimony from Benghazi whistleblowers who said they knew from the get-go that the September 11th attack was a terrorist attack, that talking points had been altered to downplay that fact, and the people on the ground in Libya were shocked that the Obama administration was trying to blame the YouTube video.
A YouTube video, was there any awareness that it was the events occurred because of a YouTube video?
The YouTube video was a non-event in Libya.
So in retrospect, does that exchange look a little bit different to you? Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel's Bill Glauber, former State Representative Michelle Litchens, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, and political consultant Mary Jo Boss. Well, Bill, I remember after that exchange, you were very, very critical of Senator Ron Johnson. Does it look different to you in retrospect?
It actually doesn't. They're still arguing about talking points. Yeah. I mean, the scandal is still about talking points. It's been overly politicized for a good reason on the Republican side. So, no, I mean, I think...
You think it's been politicized? How has it been politicized? The federal government lying to the American people about a terrorist attack?
I think because you have people already going to the point of they say they're going to impeach the president. We're not even close to that.
Well, I don't know who's been saying that, but you were very critical.
I think you've been tweeting that that's going to happen.
No, I don't think it's going to happen. I haven't been. But you were very critical of Ron Johnson. You were implying that he was a lightweight, that he was, out of his depth. Actually, he was asking the exact right question, and the reason that Hillary Clinton got upset because she didn't want to answer that question.
You may be right.
Okay. What do you think?
I think he has been vindicated. I think the sad part of this, though, is that Americans watch the mainstream media beat Ron Johnson up for what he said, but they're not going to know that these hearings are even happening because more people are paying attention to what's going on in The Voice than the mainstream media is covering what's happening with these hearings. Okay. And people need to know what's going on.
But do you think that might be changing? Because, on Friday, ABC News had a very, very strong report about all of the ways in which those talking points had been changed. And so clearly you had CBS, you have CNN, you have ABC that are beginning to say, hey, we were lied to about something of rather significance.
Well, I think what we've seen so far is that Hillary Clinton has just in a very callous way put her career over truthfulness to the American people. But what's really going to make a difference to the public and get them fully engaged on this is when we hear the stories from the families and from the families of those who were there when they want the truth, they want the answers, they want to know what happened to their loved ones.
Okay, Michael Holt.
Yeah, and I think Hillary's comments will actually come back to haunt her, particularly if she's thinking about running for president, because it did make a difference who did the actual killings. But I kind of agree that a lot of the criticism of Senator Johnson was not directed towards what he said, but he kept being very argumentative, that he was interrupting, and people thought it was disrespectful. So, I mean, you have to, in a sense, he was vindicated, but it wasn't just about that.
It is speaking truth to power, and we do have a divided government, and we also have, a separation of powers, and one of the jobs of, I think, a United States Senator is to try to get at that truth. And I thought it was very interesting that John Nichols, who is a, very liberal left-wing columnist, who is also very, very critical of Senator Johnson, actually did a walk back this week, and he said, you know what, you have to give him credit that he, in fact, was trying to elicit a question which I think we now know is somewhat central. So I guess I would go back to you,
I
Bill.
give him credit for getting the money quote that
Well,
is actually going to come back and haunt Hillary.
How bad will it haunt Hillary? Because I agree with you on that.
I don't know. Scott Rasmussen, the conservative pollster, says that the Benghazi thing may be a bust because people don't really care about foreign affairs and don't have the insight or the staying power on it. So we don't know how it's going to affect her, but it will certainly be used against her.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the questions, whether it will break through, because I do get the sense that perhaps we have been talking to ourselves a little bit about this. So the big question is, now that these whistleblowers have come out, and their testimony was pretty compelling, the mainstream media, as they begin to do the kinds of reports that CBS has been doing, the kind of report that ABC has been doing, that's going to seep into public's consciousness, but probably something else has to happen. So what has your glass half full, and what has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Bill, you go first.
Well, my glass is really full after the legislature's budget committee let through a measure barring local governments from regulating the size of sodas, and it's half empty because Wisconsin has a self-reported obesity rate of 27.7%.
Yeah, but big gulp is safe. Michelle.
My glass is half full because our state has additional funds because of our very fiscally sound budget that we passed 2 years ago. But it's half empty because once politicians know that there's additional dollars available, they have a tendency to spend it instead of giving it back to the taxpayers in tax cuts.
Okay, Michael Holt.
Well, it's half empty because we've had more rain in the last 35 days than since Noah's flood. It's half full, though, because it's beautifying our lawn, and I got 1 day to work in the yard.
And Mary Jo.
My glass is half full because the state has taken action this week to keep nutrition in the state's nutrition program. My glass is half empty because they felt the need to water it down and allow up to a third of nutrition benefits to be used for soda and chips.
Yeah, I'm along the same line with Michelle. My glass is half full because of this, $500 million in new revenue. That's good news. It's half empty because you know that the politicians will not be able to keep their fingers off it, and the lobbyists are already salivating to spend that money. Now, did state lawmakers derail Milwaukee's streetcar plan? We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. And coming up next, are the protests against Palermo's pizza half-baked? The campaign against Palermo's continues. Now, the family-owned business was exonerated by the National Labor Relations Board from charges that it improperly fired some illegal immigrants, but that has not stopped activists from boycotting the company and pressuring universities to throw the company off campuses. Well, last week at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, this scene as protesters occupied the Palermo's pizza stand in the Student Union and then react as an Associate Chancellor Jim Hill announces the stand will be shut down and all of the pizzas destroyed.
We're closing Palermo's right now, and it will remain closed for the summer. That gives
Can you speak closer to the
That gives us time to continue conversations and dialogue with you on the issue. But at this point in time, it's closing for today, and will not reopen for the entire summer.
What's going to happen to the pizza that's left on there?
Oh, that's going to be thrown out. It's basically been contaminated, so we have to throw it out.
Now, UWM officials tried to deny that they had capitulated to the protesters because they said the stand had been scheduled to be closed for the summer for renovations anyway, and they noted that frozen Palermos were still available on campus. So, Mary Jo, did the university handle this appropriately?
No, what they did in terms of closing the stand was fine. It was scheduled for closing. But what they did in terms of trying to have it both ways on their message, it just doesn't work. They had a chance to stand with a local business to solidify their relationship with their stakeholders in the community, and instead they capitulated to a small group of nut jobs and allowed them to take over and define the university.
Bill Glauber.
Well, this process is going to finally end when there's a vote on unionization.
Right.
They have to go through the NLRB to resolve a dispute. Yeah. So I think the time is going to help, and hopefully it'll get resolved, and I think that's what UW-Milwaukee was playing for at the time.
What do you think?
I want to know what the University of Milwaukee is teaching our kids, and what parents want to choose to send their children there. I mean, are they teaching their kids that it's okay to break into a business and to take it over, and you're not going to prosecute those people for violating the law that way? They should be teaching our kids how to work for a living and not just supporting the liberal agenda.
Okay, Michael Holt.
Well, part of the collegiate rites of passage is getting these kids engaged. There have been protests for as long as I remember, and I went to UWM, you know, I don't know how many of these students, though, really understand all of the issues and the history of these protests. So it's easy to get them up.
Actually, you know, you're talking about the collegiate passage. The other part of that, of course, is pizza, and the ability to get pizza. So, I mean, I love it. They were chanting, "This is what democracy looks like." No, this is what mob rule looks like. And I guess I disagree, Mary Jo. I don't think they did the right thing by shutting it down, because what they essentially did was they said, we're going to reward you. We're going to reward your bad behavior. What I would like to know is why they allowed it to be occupied, why they allowed the stand to be vandalized, why they allowed the product to be contaminated, why no one was arrested. There are no consequences, no discipline. This university has been appeasing them for months because they have been harassing the workers, they've been harassing customers. They even went so far, UWM, to paper over the name Palermos, to actually cover it up. So I think in this particular moment, what you have is the university was more concerned with appeasing these protesters, giving them the appearance of a victory, and I think that's damaging in and of itself, than standing up for this business.
Well, and especially when you compare it to UW-Madison, where they're in the hotbed of liberalism, they looked at the facts, they issued a statement saying, based on the facts, we don't have a problem with it. The NLRB cleared them, they're good with us. End of story.
And I think they were probably lucky that, you know, the workers at Palermo's were not very aggressive or defensive, because, I mean, somebody came and tried to snatch something in my hands. I mean, and then the university really would have had a problem.
Well, Bill raises an interesting question. When there is this union vote, whatever happens, will it end then? Because you would think that if in fact the workers, you know, get to vote on the union, that would be an end of the controversy. But the activists don't want there to be a vote because they think they're going to lose this vote. So I don't think they're going to stop even after that union vote. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's dish out some unsolicited advice. Bill Glover, you're first.
To the Bucks, before you do anything on hiring a coach, please contact the Boston Celtics and bring in Doc Rivers.
Michelle Litchens.
Mark Sanford, the voters gave you another chance, so don't do anything stupid.
Michael Holt.
Well, it's official. African Americans had the highest vote totals of any ethnic group. The problem in Wisconsin is we lost, listen to other folks, 4 black state representatives. So it's not a matter how many you vote, it's what you vote for.
Mary Jo Boss.
My unsolicited advice is from my former employer, the Metro Milwaukee Association of Commerce. They need to get with local officials and copy the success of Salt Lake County, where they slashed 150 pages of business regulation, reduced fees to the actual cost of regulation, and exempted some businesses from regulations completely. That's how you do economic development.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to UWM officials, in fact, university officials in general. You screwed up big time with that massive slush fund. Maybe you got to think twice before caving to these groups, appeasing radicals as opposed to thinking about the way this looks to the business community. Next on Sunday Insight, did the state legislature come up with a way to finally kick Milwaukee's streetcar plan to the curb? Mayor Tom Barrett may not get his streetcar after all, unless, of course, he wants to pay for it. The legislature's Joint Finance Committee voted this week to stop the city from shifting tens of millions of dollars of utility infrastructure costs to your electric bills. Because of the location of the trolley, utilities say that the cost of moving underground wires could be as much as $50 to $70 million. City says not. Barrett wants to stick the utilities with the cost, but under the proposed legislation, the city would have to pay instead. Would that kill the streetcar, Michelle Litchens?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's up to the taxpayers in the city of Milwaukee. I think right now they're actually fighting for the liberal title of the state. They want to take that away from Madison. The city of Milwaukee sometimes supports some of the crazy ideas that Mayor Barrett has, so I think it's up to them.
Okay, what do you think, Michael Holt?
You know, not necessarily, because I've heard some stuff come out the mayor's office that they can make a few little route changes where they won't have to disrupt some of the streets. And I think, you know, his reputation at stake, I think he's going to push this thing through regardless.
Okay, Mary Jo Boss.
Well, it's certainly dead, not because the legislature killed it, because Tom Barrett can't pay for it anymore with other people's money. And it's simply too costly. Now the cold hard truth comes out that it simply doesn't make sense.
Bill Glover.
They're waiting for the final engineers report, and they say that the $55 million is a high number, and it could be far lower. So no, I don't think it's dead yet. It's certainly on life support.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on this, because the legislature is not killing it. It's just basically saying if you want it, you need to pay for it. And obviously, there's lots of things that are very attractive if you can use other people's money, but when you have to pay for it yourself, it's different. So if they could get the cost of the utilities down to what, you know, $10, $20 million, do you think that Barrett would be willing to put in that much city money?
I don't know, but I do know that the city folks are saying that where was all this angst when electricity rates skyrocketed some 60% over 5 years? Where was the legislature then?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. But the other question will be that if, in fact, this streetcar is killed, it won't have been killed by a legislative action. It will be killed because Tom Barrett knows that he cannot sell this to the taxpayers in the city of Milwaukee. Okay, the residency rule, your reaction to the fact that the legislature appears to be putting in the budget the end of residency with the exception of the first responders who have that 15-mile radius. Was that a reasonable accommodation?
I'm not going to say whether it was a reasonable one or not. I have to cover these issues, but I do know that it does hurt the city.
Okay, what do you think? Does it hurt the city?
Actually, no. I think that every city who has a residency requirement actually now has an opportunity to talk to those individuals and say, how can we keep you here and what can we do to improve our city?
Okay, Michael Holt.
It will hurt the city, and I'm anticipating, even though the police union has said they support this, that somebody is going to object and they're going to say, how come teachers can live on the other side of the state, but we're restricted to 15 miles, and they'll probably turn around and sue. And it will hurt the city.
Did it hurt the city when you moved to Germantown?
Yep, it sure did.
Okay, all right. But you should have the right to do that.
I'm not on the taxpayer dole.
Okay.
And I still pay property taxes.
So you're able to stay in touch with the community as the editor of the newspaper while you live in Germantown?
No, I pay for 3 properties in the city of
I'm
Milwaukee.
just asking about, fortunately, you're not subject to the residency rule.
You know, it is the perfect platform for the city to get out there and start talking about some wonderful things for residents of school choice and the lakefront and so many wonderful things we have instead of lamenting the people might leave.
I think that's the point. It hurts the city. Because what Tom Barrett is really saying is that if people choose, they will choose to leave his city, that he can't sell him. Okay, is what they said this week the same thing as what you heard? Let's go around the table. We'll start with you, Bill.
Well, Scott Walker called a special meeting of the WEDC board, the jobs agency, after a scathing audit. That's what he said. What I heard was a governor trying to keep a pledge on job creation and feeling some heat.
Yeah, Michelle Hitchens.
Democrat Congressman Elijah Cummings said, death is a part of life at the Benghazi hearing, but what I heard was that death might be a part of life if you're an ambassador because we might not have your back.
Michael Holt.
Some petroleum speculators blame the spike in gasoline prices over the last month on the rain. What I actually heard was, we got y'all and we can pimp slap you anytime we feel like it.
Mary Jo Boss.
What I heard was the State Legislative Reference Bureau saying we have a $500 million surplus. What I interpreted was Scott Walker's reforms are working.
Okay, Mayor Tom, but what I heard was Mayor Tom Barrett said that if city employees are allowed to live outside the city, he wants to monetize it. What I heard was, it's really all about the money. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week, but first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Bill Glauber, you are first.
Only winners. The 8 Oak Creek police officers who first responded to the Sikh temple shooting are being honored for their heroism at ceremonies this weekend in Washington. These officers are truly Wisconsin's finest.
Michelle Hitchens.
My winners are the Benghazi whistleblowers, Mark Thompson, Greg Hicks, and Eric Nordstrom. It takes a strong person to stand up to the power of President Obama. Thank you for believing that we don't leave Americans behind to die. My loser is Madison Mayor Paul Soglin, who is pushing a resolution to check the political contributions of anyone who wants to work with the city of Madison. So conservatives, put on your Star of David and be prepared to be escorted out of the city.
Michael Holt.
Winners, Milwaukee Public Schools, if the governor goes ahead, as he said, and earmarks some of this $500 million they just found for education. The losers, I woke up Thursday morning, picked up my journal, sitting there, and 3 of the headlines talked about what Madison is going to do in Milwaukee. Whether you agree with the streetcar, with residency, or the county board, what does it say that these folks up in Madison can dictate local politics?
Mayor Joe Boss.
My winner is Chris Abele. While city officials have been flailing around with their plan to use federal mass transit funds on a streetcar, County Executive Chris Abele has been quietly working to invest in the bus system, making worthwhile improvements in a system people actually use. His decision is looking more brilliant all the time. My loser is the IRS for singling out conservative and Tea Party groups for special scrutiny. They prove that eternal vigilance is indeed the price of liberty. President Obama's remarks to Ohio State University students notwithstanding.
Well, my winner this week, Senator Ron Johnson, was ridiculed for asking Hillary Clinton tough questions. He is now vindicated. He asked the right questions, and we now know why Hillary was so upset about them. Loser Hillary. She wanted to know, what difference does it make? This week we found out truth makes a difference. Her Ron Johnson moment is going to haunt her for years. Thanks for joining us and joining my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a very happy Mother's Day.